Closed. This is the view many motorists see when arriving at the U.S.-Mexico border. Last month, the two nations agreed to restrict all non-essential border crossings, an effort to mitigate COVID-19 contagion. Under the new emergency coronavirus measures, the U.S. also announced that strict new immigration policies would be imposed.
Every week, our border agents encounter thousands of unscreened, unvetted, and unauthorized entries from dozens of countries, and we've had this problem for decades. For decades, you know the story, but now it's with the national emergencies and all of the other things that we've declared, we can actually do something about it. We're taking a very strong hold of that. And we have before, but this is now at a level that nobody's ever approached.
Taking a very strong hold has meant the closure of immigration courts and the suspension of hearings for migrants and asylum seekers, most of whom come from countries like El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras.
It's a big concern for all of those who are waiting for a court hearing date. I was meant to have a hearing on the 30th, and because of coronavirus, that has been postponed. All of our cases here, everyone's. It's very unfortunate.
There are now thousands of people like Jose Estrada who are in limbo, with no idea how long they'll be forced to wait in Mexico's migrant shelters and detention centers.
Under the new emergency measures, U.S. authorities are conducting fast-track deportations and enforcing policies that have faced strong criticism in the past.
Amnesty International's Erika Guevara says the COVID-19 pandemic should not be used as an excuse to waive any country's international obligations to human rights.
First of all, and more important, it's relevant to understand that COVID-19, the pandemic, is not the result of migration. And I think that this is extremely important precisely because governments around the world, and particularly in Latin America, in the Caribbean, in the Americas in general, the US, Canada, are starting to use the narrative about migration, about refugees, stigmatizing this population as if they were, who to blame about this pandemic.
Since 2019, some 60,000 non-Mexican migrants, many of them asylum seekers, have been denied entry into the United States under a controversial program known as Remain in Mexico, often left with no choice but to stay at shelters with notoriously unsanitary conditions. And at a time when health officials are calling for quarantine and self-isolation as the best defense against contagion, Mexico's migrant centers are becoming even more crowded. Manuel Rapalo, Al Jazeera, Mexico City.